Today, guys, we're talking footwork, specifically Muay Thai style footwork versus the kickboxing style footwork. Now, these two styles are similar in some regards, but very different in others. So we're going to dissect both footwork patterns today and really give you guys an in-depth look and an understanding about the strengths and weaknesses of each footwork style. Alright guys, Muay Thai and kickboxing are very interesting styles because very often athletes from both of them end up cross-competing. Either the Muay Thai fighters are coming over to kickboxing or kickboxing is coming over to Muay Thai, or just sometimes in general you see the footworks just move back and forward between the fight styles. Now as we go through and I give you the finer details of each style, I want you to remember, as I often say when I'm talking about technique, there's no exact right or wrong because different people's bodies work differently. So somebody may need to take a Muay Thai style stance but still utilize boxing hands. Because let's say we're looking at a kickboxer who doesn't like to bounce around a lot. He's not really on his toes. Maybe he's better off taking the style where he just kind of moves like this. So it's always okay to look at different styles and sort of take a piece from here and a piece from there and a piece from there and make your own style. That's what I'm hoping we'll do with this video. You'll be able to look at the finer details of everything and then adjust your style accordingly. So let's start off and compare the weight distribution between feet between the two styles. In Muay Thai, one of the big concerns is taking low kicks and being able to check the high round kicks because that's very big scoring if somebody hits you and knocks you backwards, or I believe even landing off the bicep scores quite highly. So for the Muay Thai fighter, that's one of the big reasons that you see their weight back here. I'd say there's probably 70 to 80% of the weight there, and the front foot is tapping. It's just light and it's ready at any point to lift and get the block off. Whereas a kickboxer, if you're a kickboxer and somebody throws a round kick at your arm and you can get two arms across and block it, that's it. The kick didn't score. So it doesn't really matter that you need to be leaning backwards. You can put your weight a little bit more 50-50, which will allow you to be more mobile. So for weight distribution, Muay Thai, 70 to 80% on the back leg. Kickboxing, you want more like 50-50. If you're bouncing around a lot. If you're not a bouncy guy, maybe more like 60-40. Now let's talk about stance length. When you're in a short stance for Muay Thai, it allows you to put that 70-80% of the weight on the back leg and bounce this one, and you don't need to have really wide. As soon as you widen your stance, you can't possibly have a large portion of the weight balanced on this foot. So that's why you see the Muay Thai fighters in the very narrow stance. We're talking sometimes like a foot distance, which is very, very narrow, but it allows them to put the weight there, to have their head directly over that back leg, and to be very quick on the checking and skipping off for the round kicks. But for kickboxing, if we're going a little bit more like 60-40 or 50-50, and now from here we're standing in this position, we're not going to be able to get as much power into our punches, so it makes a little more sense to widen out and maybe put more like 18 inches in between our feet. Now, nothing I'm saying is 100%. You know, you'll see kickboxers who fight down here who have a very, very wide stance, and you probably will see Muay Thai fighters who take a very, very narrow stance. I'm just giving approximations, but I would say 12 inches for Muay Thai and more like 18 inches for kickboxing is probably an average that is fairly realistic. Next, I want to talk about foot positioning. So if I'm facing towards you guys, pretty much for every style stance, my front toes will face directly towards the camera or towards you. The back foot, that's the interesting part. Very often in Muay Thai, you will see the back foot take a 90-degree angle. I think the reasoning behind this is just the fact that you can place the foot flat on the ground, and then through the front foot, you can lift the ball of the foot up and tap. But in kickboxing, because we're in a wider stance, having this back foot off on a 90-degree angle is not 100% necessary. In fact, for myself, what I like to do is I like to have my back foot not pointing to the side, but I like to have it on a 45 and disconnect my heel. So for a Muay Thai style, having that back heel connected is fine. For kickboxing, I prefer to disconnect, and many other fighters do, which moves us on to the next point. What are we doing in terms of bouncing? Are we staying low and fairly stationary, or are we up on our feet a little bit more? That all depends on how active you are as a fighter. But many Muay Thai fighters will stand their ground, they're up like this, and they're just putting their weight, shifting it back and forward, or being extra light on the lead foot. Whereas the kickboxers, if they're somebody who wants to be a little bit more mobile, they've elongated their stance, they've turned that back heel over, they've placed somewhat even distribution between the legs, and then a lot of times they're moving, they're bouncing, and they're going back and forward. The back and forward makes you much quicker to enter and exit, but it makes it you more susceptible to maybe low kicks and getting your leg up to block. Now the shorter stance for Muay Thai is very, very beneficial for getting little sweeps off. As soon as somebody enters, you fall to the clinch, you're able to very quickly adjust your narrow stance, square your hips up as you're supposed to, and then work from there. Whereas the kickboxing style with the longer stance, if you fall into the clinch and you hang out here for too long, you are going to get thrown like that. This is a terrible stance to be in for clinch work, which is why you don't see a lot of kickboxers be successful when they're clinching against Muay Thai fighters. They don't always alter their stance fast enough. All right, guys, next I want to talk about the angles that are often taken using your footwork between the two styles. Now, Muay Thai, kickboxing, neither of these styles have the footwork that boxers often have, which makes perfect sense because boxers have two limbs to work with. They need to be able to cut angles to find the opening, whereas for us, we either have 6 limbs or 8. If people start cutting angles, very often a good fighter will go, okay, they're cutting the angle, and then bang, stop them in their tracks. But there are some fighters who are very successful at getting footwork off. For Muay Thai, the fancier sort of footwork that we see is the ability to be able to lift a leg and slide forward and then go to an elbow. Or if we see a low kick coming, to hollow out and step backwards. It's more those smaller adjustments, but forward and back, whereas in kickboxing, it's a little more likely to see somebody throw a couple strikes and then take an angle. It's the angles that we see a little bit more on the offensive, in my opinion, in kickboxing. Muay Thai fighters, especially southpaws, are very good at taking that back foot and cutting off on little angles and creating an opening. But aggressively, if you want to be an aggressive fighter who can take angles with his footwork, I'd say from kickboxing with this wider stance, with this ability to be bouncing and quickly adjusting, this stance style is going to be much more beneficial because when you put your weight down on your heel, especially on the back foot, when that back heel hits the ground, naturally you're going to be that much slower to move. You can take maybe one step, but to take a second one takes massive adjustment, massive amount of energy through the leg. Whereas if I'm bouncing and I'm on the balls of my feet, as soon as I hit and I'm bouncing again, I can quickly make those adjustments and take those angles. Is one style's footwork better than the other? No, absolutely not. They are just created, they are sort of refined for the specific rules of each sport. Now, I personally have always enjoyed kickboxing style footwork, but again, I'm a kickboxer. I've prepared for numerous Muay Thai fights. They all fell through. I was down in Thailand utilizing the Muay Thai footwork. I had a stage of my fight career where I was a little bit more flat-footed and working from here, a little bit more of the arm bounce in Muay Thai. But for me, I felt it made me just a little bit more susceptible to being a stationary target, and I wanted to be a little bit more mobile, a little bit quicker on my feet. And if that's what you're going for, kickboxing is the stance, the style of footwork that you want to utilize. But if you're somebody who likes to stand in front of your opponent and, you know, bang the shots off, take small little adjustments, get those checks up, then obviously Muay Thai is the footwork for you. Guys, Muay Thai and kickboxing footwork, I could do a whole hour. I could just talk and talk and talk on this, have people drill. This is a short, fast video today to hopefully just refine a few things, make you understand little details. But I can always do a more in-depth video if it's something you want. You can let me know in the comments below. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like. If you haven't already, get subscribed. Train hard, guys. I'll see you back here soon for another video.